We build walls of glass and steel, moats of water and concrete, believing we can contain the wild. We give them names, study their habits, and even convince ourselves we have formed a bond. But what happens when the wild reminds us that it cannot be tamed? What happens when, in a single, terrifying moment, the line between observer and prey vanishes, and the primal world reclaims its dominion? It was a mother's simple wish for her son to see better. At the Pittsburgh Zoo, 2-year-old Maddox Derkosh stood on a viewing deck, peering towards the African-painted dogs. Signs warned against it, but in an instant of judgment, his mother lifted him onto the railing for a clearer view. That single fateful movement was all it took. He slipped from her grasp, a 14-foot drop into the enclosure below. A safety net, meant only for phones and sunglasses, became a useless trampoline, bouncing his small body directly into the heart of the pack. The world for the small boy became a blur of teeth and snarls, a primal chaos that no child should ever know. 11 painted dogs descended upon him, their ancient instincts ignited. His mother's screams were lost in the pandemonium as other visitors held her back from a desperate, suicidal leap. Before anyone could intervene, it was over. He had bled to death, a victim not just of the animals, but of a moment's miscalculation, a tragic testament to the unforgiving nature of the line we so carelessly draw. For some, that line is not a barrier, but a workplace. Dawn Brancheau was a master of her craft, an experienced trainer who had spent 15 years building a relationship with the orcas of SeaWorld. Her strongest connection was with Tilikum, a 12,000-pound giant, the king of his concrete ocean. During the Dine with Shamu show, as guests ate their meals, Dawn lay on a shallow ledge, rubbing Tilikum's head in a familiar, practiced gesture of trust. But trust is a human concept. Without warning, Tilikum's jaws closed around her. He pulled her into the water, and the show became a nightmare. For 45 agonizing minutes, the massive orca refused to let her go, thrashing her through the pool as horrified staff and guests watched, helpless. When her body was finally recovered, the autopsy told a story of unimaginable violence. Drowning was the cause of death, but her spine had been severed, her bones shattered, her scalp torn away. The bond she thought she had was an illusion, shattered by a power she could never hope to control. Years earlier, another trainer, Alexis Martinez, had learned the same brutal lesson. He was working with Quito, a 6,600-pound orca who seemed unresponsive that day. As Alexis swam towards a platform, the whale turned. It wasn't a playful nudge, it was an attack. Quito rammed him in the chest, pushing him deep under the water. His colleagues slapped the surface, shook buckets of food, but the whale ignored every command. It surfaced for a breath, then dove again, lifting Alexis's limp body on its rostrum before letting him sink to the bottom of the pool. The creature, trained for entertainment, played with the gates, delaying the rescue, asserting a final, deadly dominance. Alexis died from massive internal bleeding, his organs torn apart by the crushing force of an animal he was paid to command. Sometimes, the danger is not in the performance, but in the quiet promise of a dream job. Patricia Wyman was just 24, a wildlife biologist who had just been hired to care for wolves at a Canadian reserve. It was a place that prided itself on keeping the animals wild. Visitors watched through one-way glass, staff were forbidden from making contact. Only 4 days into her new life, Patricia entered the 15-acre enclosure alone. The wolves, normally shy, did not retreat. They stood their ground, their behavior shifting in a way no one could explain. They began to circle her, a silent, tightening perimeter. She must have realized her fatal error, but as she turned to flee, she tripped. That was the signal. The alpha male struck first, and the pack followed. They were not hungry, they were territorial. They tore at her limbs, their collective weight and strength overwhelming her in seconds. When help arrived, the wolves were standing guard over her body, a chilling tableau of nature's unwritten laws. For others, the danger lies in routine, in the simple, repetitive tasks that dull the edge of caution. Rosa King, a zookeeper at Hamilton Zoo Park, was cleaning the windows of the tiger paddock before the zoo opened. It was a mundane chore she had done countless times. But on this day, a fatal oversight occurred.
3 barriers, a heavy slide, and 2 gates that were meant to keep Sisip, the male Malayan tiger, secured, had been left open. When Rosa stepped inside, she stepped into his world. The attack was swift and devastating. The tiger's jaws clamped onto her neck, severing her spinal cord instantly. She was paralyzed, unable to fight back as the immense predator mauled her body. A visitor was the first to see her, a still figure on the ground, a silent victim of a simple, catastrophic mistake in a system that had no room for human error. That same deadly intersection of routine and risk claimed another veteran keeper. Jian Rangkh had worked with lions and tigers for nearly 2 decades. He knew the rules. The most important one was to never, ever leave the vehicle inside a predator enclosure. But on a September morning, during feeding time, with tourists watching from their own cars, Jian stepped out of his vehicle, leaving the door open. A lioness crept up behind him. She pounced, and in a heartbeat, the rest of the pride joined in. The tourists could only watch in horror, their frantic car horns useless against the frenzy. For 15 minutes the attack raged. By the time he was pulled away, his chest had been ripped open, his neck broken.
His family insisted he would never break protocol without a reason, but the reason died with him, leaving only the terrible, unanswered question of why a man with so much experience made one final, fatal choice. But what if the choice is deliberate? What if the line is crossed not by accident or miscalculation, but with intent? Nordin Montong, a cleaner at the Singapore Zoo, provided the most chilling answer. He climbed over a barrier and jumped into the white tiger enclosure, armed with a broom and a bucket. Visitors thought it was part of a show as he shouted and walked toward the 3 magnificent predators. The tigers approached, curious at first. Then one swatted him to his knees. He raised the bucket like a shield, a futile gesture against raw power. The other tigers joined in, their curiosity turning to aggression. They bit his neck, dragging his body deeper into their territory. Keepers rushed in, banging poles to distract them, but it was too late. Investigators would later rule his death a suicide, the final desperate act of a man who chose to step across the ultimate threshold, leaving our world behind for the unblinking gaze of the wild. Each of these stories is a stark reminder that no matter the enclosure, no matter the training, the wild remains sovereign. It operates on instincts we can only observe, not command. And when that barrier is broken, whether by accident, arrogance, or despair, the consequences are absolute. If these stories have given you pause for thought, consider subscribing to our channel for more explorations into the dramatic heart of history. And please, share your reflections in the comments below.